BBOR, Black Box Online Radio, coming to you from West Virginia. Well, I am back in my podcast groove now, checking out new things every single day. And there was a show last year that I discovered called Global Truths that is hosted by an individual named Dr. Keith Suter. I really like the way that he presents things. He's a very engaging narrator, but I also like the theme of his show, Global Truths, because it's all about internationalism, for lack of a better term, or how do international events affect you? Because we see things going on in China, Russia, Europe, North America, but like if you're not living in that part of the world, what does this have to do with you? And that's sort of the theme of his show, and how does it all relate together? I get his episodes from podcast1.com, but they got on the subject of the New World Order and some other things tied into that. So I think let's just play this clip here. It's about 1 minute and 45 seconds. And let's see what we have to say.
Is this idea that there is some super smart group of individuals who run the world. Sometimes they're called the Illuminati. I get this a lot because I'm a member of the Club of Rome, and so we are seen as being part of this Illuminati. In other words, this group of super smart individuals, very rich individuals, that obviously doesn't include me, but you know, the Rothschild family and all the rest of it, who are somehow pulling strings behind the scenes. And so when things go wrong, then you assume that this cabal, whatever it is plotting to do you down, basically. And it's not a new issue. You know, one of the standard examples of this is what would be called the Protocols of Zion. In other words, this forgery from Tsarist Russia, whereby the allegation is that a group of Jews got together to take over the world. And that fuels the anti-Semitism, which tragically we continue to see to this day, not least in this country. I do talkback radio, and I still have to field questions about the Protocols of Zion, even though they've been disproved. You know, these are people who've got a fixed idea. It was Winston Churchill used to say, these are people who won't change their mind and won't change the subject. So these are people with a particular mindset, and they want to be able to blame a particular group. So it's a form of scapegoating, and we're seeing that in the coronavirus. So that's one interpretation which we can look at in more detail, the whole conspiracy theory approach to life. The alternative one is what we call the cock-up theory. In other words, things go wrong. You know, it's all Murphy's Law, to use an Australian example. Whatever can go wrong will go wrong at the worst possible time.
Okay, and that was once again a segment from Global Truths hosted by Dr. Keith Suter, their episode, Conspiracies or Cock-Ups. I got, once again, available on podcast1.com. What do we make of everything that he just said right there? Although it might sound like he is some huge skeptic when it would come to things like the New World Order, he said the word Illuminati, or you're going to be talking about the cabal of individuals that are running the things behind the show, but running things behind the scenes, rather. I would say that because I follow his show somewhat regularly, I know that he is a very big believer in the deep state. But what I also tend to notice is there are a lot of people that are very much online with things like the New World Order, like the deep state, but they don't like how certain conspiracy theorists present it. Maybe somebody named Jones comes to mind, because they're like, once you begin to exaggerate the presence of this Illuminati or New World Order, deep state, shadow government, parallel government, invisible government, and you begin to exaggerate the presence, you are diminishing the quality of your message and what you're actually trying to say. But what is this New World Order or the Illuminati that they could be talking about? The first thing I would like to say is, in a previous upload we did on this channel, we mentioned something about how if there is an Illuminati out there, and I do believe there is, then they're probably not calling themselves the Illuminati. Do I actually, though, think that it's kind of like the way that Keith Suter was just laying out? What about these people who think that there's this type of cabal running the world and running the show that are pulling the strings behind the scenes, puppets and puppet masters? No, I don't. Because we've also had a recent discussion on the channel that was pulling some stuff from the Stones Unturned podcast, which is hosted by Thomas Henry Hoare, and I'm a daily listener to that one. And the way that they broke it down is saying not only is there a deep state, which this guy you were just listening to, Keith Suter, he does believe in that. He even said that politicians don't run the countries, deep states run the country. Deep states, plural. That's what they were saying on the Stones Unturned. There is more than one deep state. It's not just this group of individuals in a boardroom that is masterminding world events. I don't accept that. Do you? What it is, rather, to the contrary, is that Kevin Shipp, the former CIA operative, did a very good breakdown of the stuff when he said, some people say shadow government, some people say deep state. They often conflate it all together, but are these things exactly the same? Not necessarily. The shadow government is more about the covert actions of a government, and the deep state is about the influences and pressures that are put on the government to act in a certain way. This can tie into certain things like pressures from the mega banksters, like the banking cartels, even if you want to call them that, or it can genuinely be pressures from the genuine mafia. Especially when you look at the local governments and the state of New York, like if you get into their relationship between the governor of New York, no matter who that is, and the mafia, like the Gambino family, you see that those ties still exist. There are pressures that force a government to act in a certain way, differentiating between the deep state and the shadow government, as well as talking about there are multiple deep states. Well, what are all these guys saying? What does all of this mean? Well, I don't really talk about Dr. Amit Goswami too much on this channel, but one of the things that he advises you to do is look for the commonalities within the frameworks. Just in life in general, look for the commonalities in the frameworks. Okay? So, what is this message? What these guys are all saying is that there are oligarchs. That's what they're talking about. That these are forms of oligarchy. Because there are so many different interpretations of what is this New World Order? What is this Illuminati? What is going on behind the scenes that the general public doesn't necessarily know about that? I mean, when you have something like the CIA or the FBI, do we know absolutely everything that they do? No, of course not. Of course there are going to be things that happen, whether it's government or other agencies. To be very precise, other agencies. We don't necessarily know all of their actions, but what they're trying to talk about is there are small concentrations of power in small groups. There are oligarchs. The few try to amass an enormous amount of power, and this can be done first and foremost by obtaining a very large amount of wealth in the case of mega banksters. But the big thing is to say, mega banks are not the be-all end-all. We also have the arms company, big oils. I should have said the arms companies and big oil. Got my S in the wrong place. The whole point is, oligarchy is something real. And if you ever want to talk about the New World Order, the most clear definition that I could put forward, based on listening to all of these different people over the years, is that oligarchy is very real, and the New World Order is the mechanism which allows oligarchy to propagate, to keep power, wealth, and control for the few and keeping it away from the masses. Why? People are very power hungry, people desire wealth, people desire control, and if there were any major change in the power dynamic, then these people wouldn't be in power anymore. But the big point is, we discussed this in an upload called Alex Jones' Shadow of a Lie once, when we said that the objective is, do not get mad at the people. You can talk about the Rothschilds, you can talk about the Rockefellers, you can talk about the Morgans, you can talk about Carnegie in the past. It's not about the people. It's about the mechanism which allows concentrations of wealth and power to form in human life. And observing that, where does that come from? And we can even look for the commonalities in the frameworks of those power structures. But as you see, though, a lot of people have different theories on what this New World Order is, how does it function, and some of the more interesting ones that I've heard is that the New World Order is completely synonymous with the word neocon, neoconservative. And when people say the word neocon, immediately they're probably thinking about John Bolton or someone very similar to him. Maybe some people think of Irving Kristol or Leo Strauss or something, but John Bolton comes to mind very quickly for many people. But also Hillary Clinton is frequently described as a neocon by many of her critics. And one of the reasons why is because John Bolton was very vocal about this. If you ever watch his speeches and lectures on YouTube, we've done at least one upload dedicated solely to John Bolton and some of the things that he promotes. It's that if we do not have the power, someone else will take it from us and they will do worse things. If the United States of America or another similar nation allows, another government in, say, the Middle East or Central and South America to rise up in the power dynamic, then they will abuse the system in a more destructive way. That's why the United States has to justify things like going to war, preemptive strikes. So you can hear from, like I said, material that's available on the internet. And this is once again following into that category of the mechanism which allows oligarchy to propagate. I think we could do an entire upload just on that subject. Is the New World Order synonymous with neoconservatism? I'm pretty sure my hunch, just a hunch going into it, that I'm going to say no, that we're going to find some big exceptions with that, because I think that, well, first and foremost, neoconservatism is just a political philosophy. But one of the things about it is that the New World Order, as we just described it, is a mechanism. It is how it is happening. It is not just the way that people are thinking. It is also in both conscious and unconscious actions that this power dynamic is being manipulated. I would say, though, that as an outsider to the subject, when this idea is being shared around in the masses, it's actually somewhat difficult to get into. I mean, okay, when I first heard Alex Jones talking about the globalists, talking about the New World Order, and very similar actions, I thought he was crazy. I thought he was full of crap. I thought that everything he was saying was nonsensical. Then you begin to learn a little bit more. And as somebody said in the comments section, I don't know who this was, on someone who commented on one of his uploads back when Alex Jones was on YouTube, he's just saying that, most of the time, Alex Jones is just talking about facts. Well, he does say a lot of factual things, but the criticism that people make of him is not that these things do not happen or that these things aren't found in some newspaper article. It's taking real facts and then using fictitious connections to link it all together. And they brought up this material on the Stones Unturned as well. Alex Jones would be saying things that he cannot substantiate, talking about things that he can't back up, things that he couldn't prove. And I have been the loudest voice on the entire flipping internet when I've just said Alex Jones is a terrible debater. If you ever watch things when people can actually challenge him and he can't just shout over somebody like Piers Morgan, he is not a good debater. And they sort of discussed this in Thomas Horton's interview with John Haskins about how, once again, the concept of a conspiracy theorist exaggerating their platform, making themselves seem crazier than they actually are, just the whole concept of making lots of noise to draw an audience. You're actually hurting the message by acting in somewhat of an obnoxious way. But when you want to look at some of the other points that were discussed in Keith Suter's statement, just one real quick thing about the protocols of the Elders of Zion and the whole thing about anti-Semitism, what I would really like to just say is that, first and foremost, we've discussed Daniel Pipes' response to any sort of thing to do with the protocols of the Elders of Zion. He says it's actually just a recreation of the anti-Semitic conspiracy theory and the points that he brings up for that. I've said this before on the channel, but it's just that anti-Semitic conspiracy theories exist because in the European tradition, the Jews were often cut off from the rest of other Europeans. They had their own neighborhoods. They often intermarried. They often worked in banking because of certain religious laws. And they had their own language, being Yiddish. They had their own language, Yiddish. So it's like people just didn't understand them. They didn't know what they were all about. And some people also think that anti-Semitic conspiracy theories tie back all the way to the Bible, saying that the Jews are portrayed as the villains. I mean, we can't really explore that one too much. I just wanted to throw that in there about the protocols of the Elders of Zion and that whole thing about, Daniel Pipes was very clear in his book Conspiracy from 1997 that this was something about how it's just that there are two types of conspiracy theories that are never going to go away. Number one is the anti-Semitic conspiracy theory for the reasons that we just laid out. And the second one is the secret society conspiracy theory. When it comes to the New World Order, is the New World Order a secret society? The way we were just talking about it, no, absolutely not. Yes, you could have factions of things that are performing secret rituals. Look at the stuff that happened at Bohemian Grove, the cremation of Care, performing rituals to a Canaanite deity. Groups do have societies. What about Skull and Bones or something? Those are real societies. And even the Illuminati was a real society in the 1800s. Now their word, the Illuminati, gets used very frequently, but the whole point is, it's not only about the secret society, and we didn't even mention the Freemasons yet, but the thing is, those are just smaller groups of a larger process. And yes, there can be concentrations of wealth, concentrations of power that try to move the political system to their advantage. I don't think that that's a controversial statement. You will find that idea expressed time and time again in left-wing literature, right-wing literature, nonpartisan literature. People are very much aware of that. And it takes time to warm up to the idea that it's just very simply that some people are trying to amass large concentrations of wealth so that they can then have large concentrations of power, and they are going to move the entire public sphere to their desired outcome. And it could be big oil, it could be the arms companies, I said it right that time, and it could be various other aspects such as the mega banksters. And you also have to remember that all of these things are also trying to operate at the same time. Many different deep states, many different power circles, many different groups are, once again, they're functioning in ways that are trying to increase their own wealth and power so that they can move the political system to a desired outcome. So, in all reality, I can definitely accept that there is this type of mechanism that is allowing oligarchy to propagate. If we're going to be critical of the system, all right, that's fine. We can. But some of the other things that I believe we should also do should kind of go to the contrary and talk about some of the proposed alternatives. We mentioned the Humanity Party, which now calls themselves, they now call themselves the real Illuminati. I mean, they're trying to hijack that. We did a couple uploads about them since they changed their name to the real Illuminati and did a book discussion last year on them. But the thing to say about them is they're like, we will never have change in America as long as we have the same political system, because we will still have this mechanism that will allow oligarchy to propagate. Now, not in those exact words, but that is the overall thesis of one of their books that we were discussing last year. So then they propose a new political system, and they have their own plans. It really revolves around a system that is based on universal basic income, providing the basic necessities of life to people: food, clothing, education, shelter materials, and medicine. But I mean, that's just a proposed alternative. Other things, like the Tax Wall Street Party, advocate for. If you are somebody who is just sitting at home and you're wondering about what can I do about all the problems in the world, they say put pressure on the entity that is ripping you off the most, and that is the mega banksters. Like, put pressure on them by contacting your congressman and senator. I don't know how valuable that is, but I do give them credit for actually telling people what they can do if they want to make the world a better place. Once again, I'm not in 100% agreement with that, and we also have to remember things to do with big oil, the arms companies, and just awareness is a very big thing. Raising awareness puts pressure on people to change, and I would just say that, I mean, as of now, we're just going to keep learning and keep discussing the subjects. One thing that I would really like to do in the future is to do a book discussion on Daniel Pipes' other book about conspiracy theories. We talked about his book Conspiracy from 1997. In 1995, he put out a book called The Hidden Hand, which was more about conspiracy theories in the Middle East. Conspiracy was about conspiracy theories from Europe, tying it into the Illuminati and the evolution of the anti-Semitic conspiracy theory, as we talked about there. That's a very controversial statement, the way that he laid it out. I'm fully aware of that, but I just do not really like it when people are putting the alternative to things such as the New World Order and the Illuminati and the people running things behind the show by saying, there's nothing there. Oh, there is. There are people who are trying to rig the political system. That's not a controversial statement. There are people who are trying to gain power for their own selfishness. That's not a crazy statement. And this system allows many of these people to get together, and then you have many power-hungry people, many greedy individuals in the same group, and then they use their combined power and wealth to move the public sector to their advantage. I don't think that that is a far-out, wacky idea at all, and I barely even think that's a conspiracy theory. That's more of just like an assessment on how the political system works and how certain people are trying to rip us off and rig the game. Well, that's all for me now. I would love to hear anything that you guys would have to say about conspiracy theories, and I'd like to also remind you that if you like this upload, you can hit the like button. If you haven't subscribed yet, you're welcome to do so. And as always, you can follow the show on Instagram, BlackBoxNed88. One more time, BlackBoxNed88. And excuse me for the jumbled sentences at the beginning and throwing my S's in the wrong place, but if I just would say that's all until next time.